The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of the palace bedroom, but William couldn't feel its warmth. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling as he held Kate's favorite blue scarf. The fabric still carried her scent, that gentle mixture of lavender and vanilla that had always calmed him during difficult times. But nothing could calm him now. Nothing could prepare him for what was coming. Kate lay in the room down the hall, surrounded by medical equipment that beeped and hummed with mechanical precision. The doctors had given them the news 3 days ago. There was nothing more they could do. The cancer had spread too far too fast. All they could offer now was comfort and time. Very little time. William had always been strong. He had trained his entire life to be composed, to show dignity in the face of adversity. That's what royals did. That's what was expected. But as he sat there clutching that scarf, he felt all his strength crumbling like sand between his fingers. How could he be strong when his entire world was falling apart? How could he maintain composure when the woman he loved more than life itself was slipping away? He thought back to the day they met at university. Kate had been standing in the common room, laughing with friends, her eyes sparkling with joy. He had been just another student that day, not a prince, not a future king, just William. And she had seen him that way, had loved him that way. Through all the years, all the scrutiny, all the pressure of royal life, she had been his anchor. She had been his home. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his memories. It was one of the nurses, her face showing the kind of professional sympathy that comes from years of dealing with grief. She didn't need to speak. He knew what the knock meant. He stood slowly, his legs feeling weak beneath him, and followed her down the corridor. The family had gathered. Harry stood by the window, his face pale and drawn. The children had been brought in earlier to say their goodbyes, though William wasn't sure they truly understood the finality of it all. How could they? He barely understood it himself. His father, King Charles, sat in the corner, his eyes red from crying. Even the stoic monarch couldn't hide his pain at losing his beloved daughter-in-law. And then there was Camilla. She stood near the doorway, her posture rigid, her face an unreadable mask. William had never been close to his stepmother, but in recent years they had reached a kind of understanding, or so he thought. Now, looking at her cold expression, he felt a chill run through him. There was no warmth there, no shared grief, no acknowledgement of the tragedy unfolding before them. William moved to Kate's bedside and took her hand. It felt so small, so fragile in his grasp. Her breathing was shallow, each breath seeming to require immense effort. Her eyes fluttered open, and despite everything, despite the pain and the medication and the exhaustion, she smiled at him. That same smile that had captured his heart 20 years ago. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. William leaned closer, his ear near her lips. The words came slowly, each one a precious gift. She told him she loved him. She told him to be strong for the children. She told him not to carry guilt or regret because their time together had been perfect. Every moment had been worth it. William felt tears streaming down his face. He couldn't stop them, couldn't hold them back. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as he pressed her hand to his cheek. All the training, all the lessons in royal protocol, all the expectations about maintaining dignity, meant nothing now. He was just a man losing his wife, and the pain was unbearable. Kate's hand moved weakly to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his wet cheeks. She whispered something about the garden, about the roses they had planted together last spring. She wanted him to take care of them, to watch them bloom. She said every flower would be a reminder that love doesn't die. It just transforms into something different, something eternal. The room felt smaller somehow, the air heavier. Harry moved closer, placing a hand on William's shoulder. Charles stood and walked to the other side of the bed, taking Kate's other hand. They were a family united in grief, sharing this unbearable moment together. All except Camilla, who remained by the door, unchanged, unmoved. William's mind raced with memories. Their wedding day, Kate walking down the aisle like an angel. the birth of their first child, how they had held each other and cried with joy. Family vacations where they pretended to be normal people just for a few days. Quiet evenings by the fireplace, reading together, not needing to speak because just being together was enough. All of it was flashing before his eyes like a movie playing at impossible speed. Kate's breathing changed. The nurse stepped forward, checking the monitors, her face confirming what everyone in the room already knew. This was it. These were the final moments. William wanted to scream, to rage against the unfairness of it all. Kate was only 42. They were supposed to have decades more together. They were supposed to grow old side by side, to see their grandchildren born, to retire from royal duties and spend quiet years in the countryside they both loved. But life doesn't ask permission. Tragedy doesn't wait for convenient moments, and death doesn't care about plans or dreams or the desperate wishes of those left behind. William held Kate closer, whispering all the things he wished he had said more often. Thank you for every morning. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for seeing me, not the title, not the duty, but me. Thank you for being my partner, my friend, my everything. He told her about the future he had imagined for them, even though that future was now impossible. He told her she had made him a better man, a better father, a better human being. Kate's eyes remained on his face, full of love, even as the light began to fade from them. She mouthed the words always and forever, promises that transcended the physical world. And William knew, even through his devastating grief, that she meant it. Whatever happened next, wherever souls go when bodies fail, she would always be with him in some way. The monitors began their steady decline, and William felt his heart breaking into pieces so small they could never be put back together. This was the goodbye he had dreaded since the diagnosis. This was the moment he had prayed would never come. But prayers don't always get answered, and sometimes the cruelest thing about love is that it must end. The moment came like a whisper, not a storm. Kate's final breath was so gentle that William almost didn't realize it had happened. 1 second her chest rose slightly and then it simply stopped. The hand he held went completely still. The eyes that had looked at him with such love glazed over, staring at something beyond this world. And just like that she was gone. William heard a sound he didn't recognize at first, a raw animal cry of pure anguish. It took him several seconds to realize it was coming from his own throat. His body collapsed forward, his head resting on Kate's chest, listening desperately for a heartbeat that would never come again. His hands clutched at her hospital gown as if holding on tighter could somehow bring her back. Sobs racked his body, each one feeling like it might tear him apart. Harry was crying openly now, his hand still on William's shoulder, squeezing tight. Charles had his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The nurses stood respectfully silent, giving the family space to grieve. They had seen this scene play out countless times before, but it never got easier. Death in any form was hard, but watching a love story end was particularly cruel. Through his tears, William became aware of movement near the door. He lifted his head slightly and saw Camilla stepping back, preparing to leave. Their eyes met for just a moment, and what William saw there made his blood run cold despite his grief. There was no sadness in her face, no compassion, no shared pain for what he was going through. Instead, her expression was blank, almost irritated, as if this display of emotion was somehow inappropriate or inconvenient. She turned away without a word, her heels clicking sharply on the floor as she walked out. The sound seemed obscenely loud in the hushed room. Each click felt like a small betrayal, a reminder that not everyone loved Kate the way William did. Not everyone understood what had just been lost. To Camilla, this was just another royal duty completed, another appearance made, and now she could return to her own life. William felt anger flash through his grief, hot and bitter. How could she be so cold? Kate had always tried to build bridges with Camilla, had always been kind and respectful despite the complicated history. And this was how Camilla responded in Kate's final moment. With indifference? With a hasty retreat as if this was all somehow beneath her? But the anger faded as quickly as it came, replaced again by the overwhelming weight of loss. William didn't have the energy to think about Camilla's coldness. He didn't have the strength to care about anything except the fact that Kate was gone. His Kate, his wife, his soulmate, the mother of his children, the person who had made his life worth living. Harry helped William to his feet, supporting his brother's weight as William's legs threatened to give out. The medical staff moved in to do what needed to be done, but William couldn't watch. He couldn't see them disconnect the machines, couldn't see them prepare Kate's body for what came next. It was too much. It was all too much. He stumbled out of the room and down the hall, Harry guiding him. They ended up in a small sitting room, away from the medical equipment and the sounds of the hospital. William collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, trying to process what had just happened. The world felt wrong somehow, tilted on its axis. How could the sun still be shining? How could birds still be singing outside the window? How could life continue as normal when his entire universe had just ended? The next hours passed in a blur. Charles came in at some point, embracing William without words. Sometimes silence is the only appropriate response to tragedy. Harry made phone calls, handling the logistics that death demands. Statements needed to be prepared. The public needed to be informed. Arrangements needed to be made. The machine of royal protocol ground on, even in the face of personal devastation. William thought about the children. They were with trusted staff, being cared for, being shielded as much as possible from the harsh reality. But soon he would have to face them. Soon he would have to look into their innocent eyes and confirm their worst fears. How do you tell your children that their mother is never coming home? How do you explain death to young hearts that still believe in fairy tales and happy endings? His phone buzzed constantly with messages of condolence. World leaders, celebrities, friends, strangers touched by Kate's public work. The outpouring of love was overwhelming. Kate had been beloved not just in Britain but around the world. Her grace, her warmth, her genuine care for others had made her more than just a royal. She had been a symbol of hope and kindness in a world that often lacked both. But none of those messages could fill the void inside William. None of those words could bring her back. They were just noise, well-meaning but ultimately hollow. The only voice he wanted to hear was Kate's, and that voice was silent forever. As evening approached, William found himself back in their bedroom. Kate's things were everywhere. Her book on the nightstand, bookmarks still holding her place, her robe hanging on the bathroom door, her shoes lined up neatly in the closet. All these ordinary objects that suddenly felt sacred, precious beyond measure. He picked up her hairbrush and found strands of her brown hair still caught in the bristles. Such a small thing, but it made him break down again. He lay on her side of the bed, pressing his face into her pillow, breathing in her scent. He stayed there as darkness fell, unable to move, unable to think beyond the next moment. The palace staff respected his privacy, leaving him alone with his grief. Even Harry knew that some pain is too personal to share, that sometimes a person needs to be alone in their sorrow. Memories assaulted William from all sides. Kate laughing at one of his terrible jokes. Kate comforting him after difficult days. Kate dancing with him at state dinners, whispering funny observations about the guests. Kate in the garden with dirt on her hands and joy on her face. Kate reading bedtime stories to the children in silly voices. Kate, Kate, Kate. Every memory was precious, and every memory was torture because there would be no new ones. He thought about their last real conversation, 3 days before she slipped into the final decline. She had been so brave, so strong even as her body failed her. She had talked about their marriage, about all the good times, about how she had no regrets. She had made him promise to keep living, to find happiness again someday, though William couldn't imagine how that would ever be possible. Outside the window, London continued its evening routine. Cars moved through streets. People went to restaurants and theaters. Somewhere, someone was probably falling in love for the first time. Life went on for everyone else. But for William, time had stopped. His world had narrowed to this room, this bed, this unbearable absence. And somewhere in the palace, Camilla was probably having dinner, unmoved and unchanged, while William's whole existence crumbled into dust. The days that followed Kate's death felt like moving through thick fog. William went through the motions of living because he had no choice. The children needed him. The nation needed him. Duty demanded he stand when all he wanted to do was fall apart. He met with funeral planners, approved arrangements, made decisions about things that seemed impossibly unimportant. What did it matter which flowers lined the abbey? What did it matter which hymns were sung? Kate was gone and nothing else mattered. The public reaction had been overwhelming. Thousands of people gathered outside the palace gates, leaving flowers and notes and teddy bears. The pile of tributes grew daily, a mountain of grief from people who felt they knew Kate through her public work. In a way, they had known her. Kate had never hidden behind the royal mask. She had been genuine, real, accessible in ways that made people feel connected to her. William forced himself to walk among the mourners one afternoon. It was what Kate would have wanted. She had always believed in connecting with people, in sharing both joy and sorrow. He moved slowly through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting condolences, looking into faces streaked with tears. These strangers were crying for his wife, and somehow their grief helped carry his own. He wasn't alone in his pain. The whole world mourned with him, but returning to the palace brought him back to the complicated reality of royal life. Camilla was there, acting as if nothing had changed. She attended meetings about the funeral arrangements with the same detached efficiency she brought to all royal duties. When she spoke about Kate, it was in formal, distant terms. The late princess, she called her, never using Kate's name, never acknowledging the personal loss. During one particularly tense meeting, Camilla suggested limiting the funeral service to keep it manageable. William had stared at her in disbelief. Manageable? His wife had been loved by millions, had touched countless lives through her charity work, her warmth, her compassion. And Camilla wanted to make her funeral manageable, as if Kate was just another item on a to-do list. Harry had intervened before William could explode. His brother had been a steady presence throughout these awful days, handling things when William couldn't, standing guard when William needed space. Harry understood grief in a way most people didn't. He had lost his mother young, had carried that pain his entire life. Now he watched his brother experience a similar devastation, and it broke his heart all over again. The meeting had ended with William getting his way. Kate's funeral would be the celebration of life she deserved. Westminster Abbey, full state honors, a procession through London so people could say goodbye. Kate had given so much to the public during her life. The least they could do was give the public a chance to mourn her properly. Through all of this, William struggled with the simple act of existing. Sleep was impossible without medication. Food tasted like ash. Colors seemed muted, as if the world had lost its vibrancy the moment Kate left it. He found himself talking to her sometimes, forgetting for just a moment that she was gone. He would think of something funny to tell her, would turn to share it, and then remember with crushing force that she wasn't there, would never be there again. The children were both his salvation and his greatest heartbreak. They needed him to be strong, to be their rock in this storm. His oldest asked questions William didn't know how to answer. Where did Mummy go? Will we see her again? Why did she have to die? The younger one seemed to understand on some level, but kept expecting Kate to come home, kept asking when she would be back. Each time, William had to explain again, had to watch confusion and pain cross their small faces. He held them when they cried. He read them Kate's favorite stories. He showed them photos and videos, wanting them to remember her smile, her laugh, her love. They would grow up without their mother, and that reality was almost as painful as his own loss. Kate had been such a wonderful mother. Patient and playful and present. She had made motherhood look easy, though William knew it wasn't. She had poured so much love into those children, and now they would have to live with a Kate-shaped hole in their lives. Charles tried to be supportive, but his own grief got in the way. He had loved Kate like a daughter. She had brought warmth and normalcy to the royal family, had helped bridge gaps and heal old wounds. Her death had shaken him deeply. He and William spent time together, two men who had both lost women they loved, finding comfort in shared sorrow. But Camilla remained cold, distant. She performed her duties as queen with perfect precision, but there was no heart in it. When the press praised Kate's legacy, Camilla's smile looked forced, strained. When people spoke about how much Kate would be missed, Camilla changed the subject. It was as if she couldn't stand hearing Kate's name, couldn't bear the reminder that Kate had been beloved in ways Camilla never was. William noticed, and it hurt. He had tried for years to accept Camilla as part of the family, for his father's sake if nothing else. But her reaction to Kate's death, her coldness in the face of his devastation, made him see her differently. She wasn't just emotionally distant. She was actively indifferent to his pain, and that was unforgivable. One evening, William found himself in Kate's private sitting room, a space she had decorated herself. It was full of personal touches, photos of the children, artwork they had made, books she loved, a cozy chair by the window where she used to read. He sat in that chair and felt closer to her than he had in days. This room still smelled like her, still carried her energy. He found her journal in a drawer filled with her neat handwriting. He shouldn't read it, knew it was private, but he needed to feel connected to her thoughts. The entries were mostly about daily life. Things the children said, garden observations, thoughts about upcoming events. But there were also entries about him, about their marriage, about how grateful she felt for their life together. Reading her words, seeing proof of her love written in her own hand, brought both comfort and fresh pain. Near the end of the journal, from just a few weeks before she got too sick to write, Kate had written about facing death. She wasn't afraid, she wrote. She had lived a good life, had loved deeply and been loved in return. Her only sadness was leaving William and the children. She wrote about her faith, about believing they would all be together again someday. She wrote instructions for William, gentle advice about moving forward, about taking care of himself and the children, about eventually opening his heart to the possibility of happiness again. William read those pages over and over, tears streaming down his face. Even facing death, Kate had been thinking of him, trying to take care of him. That was who she was, always putting others first, always spreading love and light wherever she went. The world had lost someone truly special, and William had lost his everything. The morning of the funeral dawned gray and misty, as if the weather itself mourned Kate's passing. William had barely slept, had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, dreading this day. He knew what it meant. The funeral would make Kate's death real in a way nothing else had. Once she was laid to rest, once the ceremonies were complete, there would be no more hoping this was all a terrible nightmare. It would be permanent, final, irreversible. Dressing in his formal military uniform felt like putting on armor he no longer believed in. The medals and ribbons meant nothing today. All the honor and prestige of his position couldn't protect him from the pain of what he was about to face. His hand shook as he adjusted his tie. Harry came to help, neither brother speaking. Words would have shattered the fragile control they were both maintaining. The palace staff moved quietly through the halls, their faces somber. Many of them had worked with Kate for years, had seen her kindness firsthand. She always remembered their names, asked about their families, thanked them genuinely for their service. They weren't just mourning a princess. They were mourning a good person who had treated them with respect and warmth. William went to check on the children before leaving. They were dressed in black, looking so small and lost. The oldest tried to be brave, standing straight like William had taught. But the younger ones clung to their nanny, confused by the solemnity of the day. William hugged each of them, promised they would get through this together, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. The car ride to Westminster Abbey passed in a blur. Crowds lined the streets, thousands upon thousands of people standing in respectful silence. Some held photos of Kate, others wiped tears from their eyes. The entire nation seemed to have stopped to honor her. William stared out the window, overwhelmed by the display of public grief. Kate would have been touched by this, he thought. She would have appreciated knowing how much she mattered to people. Charles and Camilla were already at the Abbey when William arrived. His father looked 10 years older than he had a week ago, the weight of grief aging him visibly. But Camilla looked composed, her face set in an expression of practiced solemnity that didn't reach her eyes. She wore black as required, but somehow managed to make it look like just another outfit, just another royal appearance. There was no rawness to her grief because there was no real grief to hide. Inside the Abbey, the sight of Kate's coffin made William's knees weak. It was covered with white roses, her favorite flowers, the same ones they had in her wedding bouquet. The coffin was closed, and William was grateful for that. He wanted to remember Kate alive, vibrant, full of light, not the pale, diminished figure she had become in those final days. The Abbey filled with mourners. World leaders and celebrities sat alongside Kate's family and friends. People she had met through her charity work. Children she had helped through her foundations. Every seat was taken, and still more people watched from outside on screens set up throughout London. This was more than a funeral. It was a testament to a life well lived, to love freely given, to a legacy that would outlast death. The service began with a hymn Kate had chosen herself, months ago when she knew death was coming. Her voice, from a recording made before she got too weak, filled the Abbey. She was singing to them from beyond death, one last gift of her beautiful spirit. William couldn't hold back his tears. They streamed down his face as he listened to his wife's voice, knowing he would never hear it in person again. The eulogy fell to William. He had insisted on speaking, though everyone worried it would be too much for him. He stood at the podium looking out at the sea of faces and began with the simple truth. Kate had been the love of his life, his best friend, his partner in every way that mattered. She had made him better, kinder, more complete. And now she was gone, leaving a hole in his heart that could never be filled. His voice broke several times as he spoke. He talked about the day they met, about falling in love, about building a life together. He talked about Kate as a mother, how she made their children feel safe and loved every single day. He talked about her charity work, how she used her position to help others to shine light on important causes. He talked about her laugh, her kindness, her unwavering support even in difficult times. The Abbey was completely silent except for the sound of crying. Not just from William, but from everyone gathered. Hardened politicians wept openly. Royal guards struggled to maintain composure. Even the most cynical journalists found themselves moved by the raw emotion of William's words. This wasn't a formal royal speech. This was a heartbroken husband saying goodbye to his wife, and the pain was universal. When William mentioned his last conversation with Kate, when he talked about how brave she had been facing death, his voice failed completely. He stood there gripping the podium, trying to compose himself enough to continue. Harry stood from his seat, ready to support his brother if needed. But William held up a hand. He needed to finish this. He needed to honor Kate properly. He spoke about gratitude. Despite the unbearable pain of losing her, he was grateful for every moment they had shared. Grateful for her love, her wisdom, her light. He ended with a promise. To live in a way that would make her proud. To raise their children with the values she had taught them. To carry her memory forward with love, not bitterness. To find a way somehow to keep going. As William returned to his seat, the Abbey erupted in quiet applause. It was unusual for a funeral, almost improper, but people couldn't help themselves. The speech had been beautiful and devastating and real. William had opened his heart completely, had shown his pain without shame. In doing so, he had given permission for everyone else to grieve openly too. The rest of the service passed in waves of music and prayers and readings from Kate's favorite poems. Friends spoke about her impact on their lives. Representatives from her charities talked about her dedication to helping others. Each tribute added another layer to the picture of who Kate had been, what she had meant, what the world had lost. Through it all, William noticed Camilla. She sat ramrod straight, her face impassive. When others cried, she remained dry-eyed. When people spoke about Kate's warmth and kindness, Camilla's expression didn't change. She was present physically, but emotionally absent. It was clear she was there out of obligation, not genuine sorrow. William felt anger rise in his chest again. How dare she be so cold? How dare she sit there unmoved while everyone else shattered with grief? But the anger faded as the ceremony drew to a close. William was too tired, too broken to sustain it. As they prepared to carry Kate's coffin out for the final procession, all William could feel was emptiness. The service had been beautiful, a worthy tribute to an extraordinary woman. But it changed nothing. Kate was still gone, and William still had to figure out how to live in a world without her. The procession from Westminster Abbey to the burial site moved through London like a river of sorrow. William walked behind Kate's coffin, flanked by Harry and his father. The military honor guard moved with precision, their faces stoic despite the emotional weight of the moment. Behind them, Kate's family followed, her parents looking shattered, her siblings supporting each other through visible grief. The streets were lined with people as far as William could see. They stood in complete silence, a tribute more powerful than any words. Some threw flowers as the procession passed. Others simply stood with hands over hearts, tears flowing freely. The quiet was profound, broken only by the sound of footsteps and the distant tolling of church bells throughout the city. William's mind drifted as he walked. He thought about all the times he and Kate had traveled these same streets for celebrations. Royal weddings, jubilees, state occasions. Kate had always been by his side, smiling and waving, bringing warmth to the formal proceedings. She had transformed the monarchy simply by being herself, by showing that royals could be both dignified and deeply human, Now these streets would forever carry the memory of her final journey. The burial was to take place at a private chapel on the royal estate, a place Kate had loved. She used to walk there during difficult times, finding peace in the quiet gardens and simple stone building. William had agreed to this location because he knew Kate would have wanted it. Somewhere peaceful, somewhere beautiful, somewhere away from the constant scrutiny of public life. As they reached the chapel, a smaller group continued forward. Only close family and intimate friends would witness the actual burial. William was grateful for this privacy. The public service had been necessary, proper, but this final goodbye needed to be personal. This was where William could truly say farewell without cameras, without protocol, without the weight of the world watching. The chapel was decorated with more white roses, their scent filling the small space. Candles flickered in the afternoon light streaming through stained glass windows. It was beautiful and serene, exactly the kind of place Kate would have chosen. William stood by the coffin one last time, his hand resting on the smooth wood, trying to feel some connection to the woman inside. The priest spoke words about eternal rest and resurrection, about love conquering death and souls reuniting in heaven. William wanted to believe it. He needed to believe that death wasn't the end, that somewhere Kate still existed, that they would find each other again. But standing there, facing the reality of her coffin being lowered into the ground, belief felt impossibly hard. When the moment came, William watched as Kate's coffin descended into the earth. Each inch it dropped felt like a piece of his heart being torn away. This was it, the absolute finality. No more hoping she would miraculously recover. No more waking up thinking maybe it was all a bad dream. Kate was gone and her body was being returned to the earth and life would go on without her. William stepped forward and dropped white roses onto the coffin, followed by the children. They didn't fully understand the permanence of what was happening, but they knew it was important. His oldest held onto William's hand tightly, sensing his father's distress even if not comprehending its full depth. The younger ones watched with wide, confused eyes as their mother disappeared beneath the ground. One by one, others came forward with flowers and final words. Harry spoke quietly about the sister-in-law who had welcomed him so completely into the family. Kate's parents stood together supporting each other, their faces showing the unnatural grief of outliving a child. Kate's siblings shared memories between tears, talking about the wonderful person their sister had been long before she became a princess. When it was time for Camilla to approach, William watched carefully. She stepped forward, dropped a single rose with no particular ceremony or emotion, and stepped back. No words, no visible feelings. Just another obligation completed. She stood slightly apart from everyone else, as if unwilling or unable to share in the collective grief. Charles noticed too. William saw his father glance at Camilla with something like disappointment in his eyes. Even Charles, who loved his wife, seemed troubled by her coldness on this day. Kate had been family. Kate had been important, and Camilla's indifference was becoming impossible to ignore or excuse. The burial concluded with a final prayer. As people began to disperse, heading back to their cars and their lives, William remained. He stood by the fresh grave, unable to leave. Harry stayed with him, silent support, understanding that some goodbyes take longer than others. The chapel grounds emptied until only the two brothers remained in the late afternoon sunshine. William finally spoke, his voice hoarse from crying. He told Harry he didn't know how to do this, how to live without Kate, how to raise their children alone, how to face each day knowing she wouldn't be there. Harry reminded him that he didn't have to figure it all out at once. Just get through today, then tomorrow, one moment at a time. That's all anyone could do. They talked about Kate, sharing favorite memories, funny moments that made them smile despite the tears. Times Kate had helped them through difficult situations, the ways she had changed their family for the better. Harry confessed he had always been a little jealous of what William and Kate had together. True partnership, genuine love, the kind of marriage everyone hopes for but few achieve. William told Harry that losing that kind of love was worse than never having it at all, though he still wouldn't trade a single moment with Kate, even knowing how it would end. As evening approached, they finally left the chapel. William took one last look at the grave, now covered with flowers from mourners. He made a silent promise to Kate. He would survive this. He would honor her memory. He would make sure their children knew how incredible their mother was. He would find a way to keep living, even though part of him had died with her. Back at the palace, there was a reception for close friends and family. William moved through it mechanically, accepting condolences, making appropriate responses, functioning on autopilot. People meant well, but their words of comfort felt hollow. Nothing anyone said could ease the pain or fill the void. Camilla was there, playing her role as queen, speaking to guests with polite detachment. William overheard her talking to someone about returning to normal schedules, about upcoming royal duties, as if Kate's death was just a brief interruption in the calendar. The casual way she discussed moving forward, barely a week after Kate had died, made William's anger flare again. He found himself in a quiet corner with some of Kate's closest friends. They shared stories about her, laughed and cried together, kept her alive through memories. These people had genuinely loved Kate for who she was, not what she represented. Their grief was real and deep. Being with them felt more healing than all the formal condolences and royal protocols. One friend mentioned how Kate had talked about William in those final weeks. She had been worried about him, about how he would cope. She had made her friends promise to check on him, to help him through the grief, to remind him that life was still worth living. Even dying, Kate had been taking care of others. That was her nature. That was who she was. As the evening wore on and guests departed, William retreated to his quarters. He was exhausted beyond measure, emotionally and physically drained. But sleep wouldn't come easily. It never did anymore. He lay in bed on Kate's side again and let himself cry without trying to stop. Tomorrow he would have to be strong for the children. Tomorrow he would have to face royal duties and public expectations. But tonight he could simply be a man who had lost everything that mattered. 3 months had passed since Kate's death, though it felt both longer and shorter to William. Time moved strangely in grief. Some days crawled by with unbearable slowness. Others disappeared in a blur of obligations and survival. He had learned to function, to maintain appearances, to be the father and prince he needed to be. But inside he was still broken, still searching for pieces of himself that had been buried with Kate. The children were adjusting in their own ways. The oldest was struggling the most, old enough to understand the permanence of death, but too young to process such enormous loss. William found himself having the same conversation over and over. Yes, Mummy is really gone. No, she's not coming back. Yes, it's okay to be sad. Yes, it's okay to be angry. Navigating his own grief while helping them navigate theirs was the hardest thing William had ever done. The younger children seemed to accept the new reality more easily, though William knew the full impact would hit them as they grew older. They would have fewer memories of Kate, would know their mother more through photos and stories than actual experience. That broke William's heart in a different way. Kate had been such a hands-on mother, so present and engaged. Now her children would grow up with just an outline of who she was, a memory that would fade despite William's best efforts to keep it alive. Royal duties had resumed. William threw himself into work, finding that staying busy helped. When he focused on tasks, on meetings, on appearances, he didn't have to think about the empty space beside him. He poured energy into Kate's charitable causes, determined to continue her legacy. If he couldn't have her, he could at least ensure her work lived on. But palace life remained complicated by Camilla's presence. In the months since Kate's death, Camilla had never once asked William how he was coping, never acknowledged his grief beyond the bare minimum required by protocol. She continued her royal duties with the same efficient coldness, seeming almost relieved that the emotional drama of Kate's death was behind them. William had tried to let it go, tried to focus on his own healing rather than Camilla's failings, but it festered inside him, a bitter seed of resentment. Kate had tried so hard to build a relationship with Camilla, had extended kindness despite their complicated history, and Camilla had responded with indifference, with coldness, with an inability or unwillingness to care. The breaking point came at a charity event, one that Kate had founded years earlier. William attended to show continued support, knowing how much the cause had mattered to Kate. Camilla was there too, fulfilling her role as queen. During her brief remarks, she spoke about the importance of the charity's work but never mentioned Kate, never acknowledged that Kate had built this from nothing, had poured her heart into it, had made it successful through her genuine passion and dedication. After the event, William confronted her privately. His voice was controlled, but his anger was clear. How could she stand there and not mention Kate? How could she benefit from Kate's legacy without acknowledging it? Camilla responded with cool dismissal. She said she was simply being professional, avoiding emotional displays that might upset donors. She said William was being overly sensitive, that grief was clouding his judgment. The conversation escalated. William pointed out that Camilla had been cold since Kate's diagnosis, absent emotionally even in the final moments. Camilla defended herself, saying she had been there, had attended the deathbed as required. William shot back that presence wasn't the same as caring, that going through motions wasn't the same as genuine grief. Camilla's mask slipped for just a moment. She admitted, in a tone that dripped with long-suppressed resentment, that she had found Kate's popularity difficult. The public had adored Kate in ways they never adored Camilla. The press had praised Kate while continuing to scrutinize Camilla's every move. It had been hard, Camilla said, to always be compared unfavorably to someone who seemed perfect. William stared at her, stunned. So that was it. Jealousy. Even in death, even in tragedy, Camilla couldn't let go of her envy. She couldn't mourn Kate properly because she had spent years resenting her. The revelation made William's anger turn to something closer to pity. What a sad way to live, he thought. What a waste of energy to spend years jealous of someone who had only ever tried to be kind. He told Camilla that Kate's perfection wasn't an act. She really had been that good, that warm, that genuine, and if Camilla had spent less time resenting her and more time learning from her, maybe the public would have embraced her differently. The words were harsh, but William didn't regret them. Camilla needed to hear the truth, even if it hurt. After that confrontation, William and Camilla maintained professional civility, but nothing more. Charles was caught in the middle, understanding both sides but unable to fix the rift. The family dynamics had shifted permanently. Kate's absence had revealed cracks that her presence had helped cover. Her warmth had balanced against Camilla's coldness. As the anniversary of Kate's death approached, William found himself at her grave regularly. He would sit in the chapel gardens talking to her as if she could hear. He told her about the children, about funny things they did, about small victories in their healing. He told her about his struggles, his lonely nights, his moments of anger and despair. He told her about Camilla, about the confrontation, seeking her wisdom even though she couldn't respond. The roses they had planted together were blooming, just as Kate had hoped. William tended them carefully, finding peace in the simple act of caring for something beautiful. Each flower felt like a message from Kate, a reminder that life continues, that beauty persists, that love doesn't end when breathing stops. One evening, as William sat by Kate's grave watching the sunset, he felt something shift inside him. The pain was still there, would probably always be there in some form. But alongside it he felt gratitude. Gratitude for the years they had together. Gratitude for the children they created. Gratitude for the love they shared. Kate had made his life richer, deeper, more meaningful. Even though losing her hurt beyond measure, having known her love was worth the pain, he thought about what she wrote in her journal, about wanting him to find happiness again. He couldn't imagine that now, couldn't picture a future where joy felt possible, but he made a promise to Kate and to himself. He would try, he would keep living, not just surviving. He would raise their children with love and laughter. He would honor her memory by being the man she believed he could be. As darkness fell, William stood to leave. He touched Kate's headstone, tracing her name with his fingers. The stone was cold, but the memory of her warmth remained. That warmth would be his guide forward, his light in the darkness. Kate was gone, but her love remained, woven into the fabric of his being, inseparable from who he was. Walking back to the palace, William looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. Somewhere up there, he liked to think Kate was watching over them. He whispered a quiet goodnight to her, then turned toward home and the children who needed him. Life continued even in the face of unbearable loss, and William would continue too, carrying Kate's love forward one day at a time until they met again.